Good afternoon. Welcome everybody. If we could please be upstanding for his worship from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will start off with a prayer today. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather here today, we humbly bow before your presence. Grant us the wisdom to discern, the humility to accept, and the strength to follow the path you set before us. As we seek your guidance, Lord, as we embark on this meeting, may your light shine upon our decisions, and may our decisions align with your divine will. In your holy name we pray, amen. Please be seated. Again, welcome everyone. Wow, we have a very full chamber today. Welcome everyone to the proceedings here today, where we will be discussing the annual plan submissions. We'll be discussing more and striking the rate potentially on the 25th of June, just so councillors are aware and also the public are aware. Thank you for all coming out today. It's great to see such a large presence. I will start off with apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Stringer. Any other apologies? Could I please have a mover that we accept that apology? Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Confirmation of the minutes of meetings on Tuesday 28th and Wednesday 29th of May 2024. Councillor Phillips, happy to move? Question? Happy to move? Seconder? Councillor Dixon? Any further questions or comments? About to go through them anyway. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Any conflicts today? Appear to be none. Item number 3 is the analysis of feedback received for the draft 2024-2025 annual plan. And I would like to welcome our brand new Chief Executive, Debbie Lascelles. Welcome to the top table, and I will throw over to you for comment on the report.
Thank you, Mayor Ben. Welcome everybody. It's great to see members of the public, staff, councillors, your worship. Great to see you all here today. Just a quick note on process before we kick off. Just a reminder that we're here today to deliberate on the submissions we've received from the public, with view to seek clarity on any of the staff responses to those submissions. We don't make any final decisions today. That part of the process will be covered by the next meeting, which is on the 25th of June. Thanks, everyone.
Did any other staff want to comment on this report before we kick into it? All happy? Councillors, questions, comments, debate? Councillor Val.
Can I just ask a procedural question in terms of how you wish to deal with the individual submissions that have come in, or do you want us to discuss it by way of overview in some form, please?
Open to interpretation. I mean, we were all here for the submissions individually, so maybe an overview and any suggestions of a way forward might be most helpful. If there are any individual submissions that you'd like to discuss, you're welcome to. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we should be able to ask individual questions about individual submitters. Right? I've just got one here from Lisa King about the fluoridating of the water supply, $250,000 a year. I understand that we're not legally binded to do that yet. So why are we putting that money aside? It's 1% of rates that we can't afford. We shouldn't have to take out. Maybe Aaron or someone could give us an idea what the story is with that.
Through you, Your Worship, The 250,000 is not per year. That is to install it. We haven't had a direction yet from the Ministry of Health to do it, but what tends to happen is you get a short-term notice that you have to do it. So what we've done is allocated that money for that project, so that if we get a letter of direction, then we have the funds available.
Because they just give a short notice on that, but it may not happen this year. That's just all I'm asking.
I thought my understanding was there was a directive for it to be done by mid-2025. Is that incorrect?
Through you, Your Worship, that's correct for the ones that have had the direction. So if you've seen this week, the Waitaki District challenged that letter of direction, and they have lost, and they have till June 2024, I think it is, to 2025 to install and have it operating. So there is the risk that we would get it in this financial year. So that's why we've allocated those funds.
Can I just provide some clarity on that? So that's currently debt funded at the moment. So if the project was not to proceed, the money would either be carried over into another year or just left unspent.
So my understanding would be if that directive came, there would be an opportunity for council to take the same motive as Waitaki and protest it if that was the council's prerogative. Thank you. Councillor Gardine.
So it will have no effect on the operational cost, so then it should have any effect at all on rate increases until the loan kicks in?
That is correct.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. There were a number of submissions that supported not changing the garden plants as much and putting in perennials and not annuals. I'd just like to ask our manager of Parks and Reserves if that is less of a cost to us, and there are a lot of comments about cutting back in Parks and Reserves, and some of our submitters are against that. So I'd just like some comment from the manager, please.
I was trying to, I guess just put some context around the bedding schemes. On an annual basis, we put in about 25,000, 26,000 plants twice a year. From what I can gather, we've been doing that since about 1990, so nothing has changed in that area, except that, like in the corner outside the new library, that was bedding previously, so that's reduced the number by about 1,000 plants. And then there's an area at the Gore Bowling Club that we won't be planting this coming season, so that reduces it by another 700 or 800 plants. But yeah, I think the sort of the simplistic idea of putting perennials in versus annuals is not as straightforward as, you know, like perennials typically have maybe a 2 to 5 year life in a civic space. So you know, and there is work involved in pruning and cutting back flowers and a whole lot of other things. So it's not you're not quite it's not quite an apples versus apples sort of comparison. So, thank you.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for Keith again too. It's really only the main entrance and the main part of the town, the small area that's planted in annuals. Is that correct? The main street?
Yeah, it's essentially the main street, and there's a section in Matara, there's
Yes.
one in Charlton, end of town, and there's also one at the East Score entrance to town. So essentially, and then the other area is the public garden. So, but yeah.
Yep, so I'm just clarifying that it's not all spread throughout town, it is only a very focused area.
Yes, it is. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yes, just through your worship, I think it's the CNT one, regarding the funding for the Ready for Living. So will we have a yes or no from the Vickery Trust by the 25th of June? Do we know where that sits? Whether that funding's there? Just a question for the CEO, sorry.
We should have a response before the 25th of June, yes.
So we should have that?
We're expecting it imminently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenzie, did you have your hand up before?
It's just a question for Keith. You've probably already answered it, Keith. My question is the difference between planting flower beds and having perennials, etc. With the maintenance of the perennials, there wouldn't be a lot of difference. Would that be fair comment in cost per year?
Yes, essentially obviously we do all the work in house. I would, having worked in a commercial nursery myself previously, I would rate Vicky McKinnell, our head propagator. She's been doing this job for about 25 years. She's very good and competent with it, so I would suggest their operation is very efficient. So in terms of cost, essentially we've got 3 people working in the main street, and then we've got a couple of people working in the Gore Greenbelt, which includes the gardens. We can reduce the area of bedding, so that's a material cost, but we still require the same staff, really. So, I don't think there isn't an obvious, labour saving or that comes out of it, really. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Keith.
Sorry, just on that, Keith, so if it was to be planted on annuals, would you still need to go down and weed them twice a year? Is that basically what you're saying, with the same level of staff?
Yeah, in terms of the maintenance, we're still going to be spending a lot of time weeding, deadheading, whatever. So it is, they are quite comparable in that regard. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gardine.
Yes, Sally McIntyre's submissions touched on quite a number of asset renewals and things that were she thought was unnecessary, and I've sort of picked out 3 probably that we need some comment on. Is the gravelling of the east side lane into the multi-sports complex at 60,000, the 500,000 renewal of the water pipe in Charlton Road, and 250,000 to be spent on the tower ceiling at the airport. And I'm just wondering whether that's necessary to go ahead with those sort of items, whether they're operational or capital, in a year that the public are feeling the pinch. And in my lifetime as councillor, I've never seen a 21% rate rise yet, and I don't want to see one now. And probably that knocks off about 810,000 for this year, puts us into a long-term plan where we can plan it out a bit better. But just some comment on that. Thanks from the operational managers on those 3 things. There's other places too that could be touched on, but that's a good starter.
Through your worship, the multi-sports complex, that 60,000 there was put into the LTP approximately about 6 years ago for that, and the purpose of it was at the day to seal that access for contractors and equipment down the east side of the stadium. When we looked at the LTP, which has been deferred for a year, we looked at it, and for 20,000 we can actually redo that area with packed gravel, and which will alleviate a lot of the issues of equipment being taken in or taken out of the stadium at different times, but also because the high roof area of the stadium, most contractors, when they're doing lighting or anything, have to take scissor lifts, etc. in. So 20,000 of that would be able to redo that, plus put a footpath around the rest of the building there, and the other 40,000 was to be used for patching up a lot of the potholes, etc., and a lot of the seal that actually does need replacing or resealing in the car park in its entirety.
Can I just interrupt there before we get on and a bit further on in a whole lot of detail? So those projects are either all debt funded or depreciation funded, so there will be very minimal impact on rates.
Aaron?
Through you, Your Worship. The Charlton Road water main that's up for renewal, we're having a lot of failures on that now, so there is a huge risk of that totally letting go. So in the past 3 years, we've had 7 or 8 repairs, and that's probably in the last 18 months. You do a repair and then it's blowing out. So there's a high risk of not being able to supply water along there if we don't move on with it.
Councillor Gardner?
Are we going to have capacity to do that, as well as the drilling the under the river and water mains across to from East Gore to the Hilbury Ave all in 1 year? Sometimes these projects seem to flow over to the next.
Through you, Your Worship, totally different funding arrangements for them. So yeah, there is definitely the capacity to do both those projects.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Councillor. Did you want feedback on the airport still? Are you happy to do that, Neil, or another person?
With the spending of the money on the taxiway, again, that was put into the long-term plan several years ago, before I actually came. But it has been deferred each year on the basis that we needed that funding for other maintenance work elsewhere. And it is part of the lease, which we get income from the leases down there at the airport. And with that, it is really the seal is such that we do have to sweep it frequently. When we put the sucker truck on to clean it, it actually started to lift some of the seal, so we've had to stop doing that. And the reason for it is only the taxiway along in front of the hangars, and any damage from loose stones or that debris, helicopters, fixed wing aircraft can all get prop damage, etc. on that. So really at the moment that taxiway is not fit for purpose. The airport is used for a lot of training exercises, and there's ones come down from Oamaru, Dunedin for flying in, and they're more used to a nice clear tarmac and or concrete, so some damage can often occur when somebody comes in there and not really realising that they're basically on a gravelled area.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe you might be able to help us out with this. Alan Thomas pulled out something that I've got about is GST on rates. And is local government New Zealand themselves getting back at central government? Are we any further forward, or is it just a lot of talk going on and waving of hands?
I think it's fair to say that LGNZ is having very regular talks with the government. I don't think those talks have resulted in anything tangible for local government yet, but those talks are continuing.
Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, because on that, I think it's if I'm right, Lorna, it's about $4 million that we could offset against our rates, which is how many percent?
No, it would be 1% of rates is about $225,000. So it's getting up around that 14-15%.
Thank you, Councillor. Good point. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. There were several submissions in regards to the grants, and I'd just like to inform the people that that'll be part of the funding review in part of the long-term plan, and it'll be out for community consultation. Some will be, some won't be, and part of that was looking at all our MOUs with reviewing those as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDonald.
I'd just like to speak a wee bit about the airport taxiway. If we were getting a sensible lease, I'll use the word sensible lease off there, that gave us a rate of return, then I wouldn't have so much of a problem with it. But the lease we're getting, that I understand, reading some notes there before, will be less than the rates we had received off that if it was if we had it actually broken up into sections and sold. So, you know, having to spend $250,000 of ratepayers' money there for a very, very small group of people, and some of them are commercial operators, really sticks in my throat when I'm trying to keep the rates down for the average ratepayer. If there were 1,000 people of our ratepayers using that, I wouldn't have any inkling of a problem to spending the money. But when I think there's probably less than 30 or 40 people getting any benefit in this district, most of the aircraft that take off there that to do with top dressing would fly out of this district. I would think I could count the number of farms on my hand that actually fly super on or use that airport as a base to fly super on to our local farms in Lyme. They all go outside the district because we've got a very small district. So I just find the airport spending this money, it's very difficult to me to agree to spend it, sorry. Even though you would like to spend it, I find it very difficult to justify in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just on that seal, before I get to Councillor Gardine, once that seal's done, if it's done, how long will that seal likely last for?
Approximately 15 to 20 years.
Thank you, Councillor Gardine.
A few years ago, I noted in this council that we should sell the airport, and I noted that the Auckland City Council has sold their shares in their airport, and the Wellington City Council are going to sell their shares in their airport. The airport's got a CV of $1.8 million. We probably could get, we won't probably get that because CVs are a bit high at the moment, but it could be sort of $1.5 million. But I mean, this is a thing that should be brought up for a long-term plan in this coming year. And why should we spend $250,000 if we consider selling it? Thank you.
Councillor Reid, then Councillor O'Donnell.
Just in response to Councillor Gardine, that currently while we have an agreement and leases with those people using it, they would be expecting health and safety to be a priority for the council. And that's why we should tarmac it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Val, satisfied? Councillor McDonald?
There'll be alternative ways of managing it. The helicopters are only allowed in a very small region. I'm concerned about them getting damaged. But as far as the propped aircraft go in front of all the hangars, they can just have a notice said there, you just either tow it or push it across the tar seal. That way we could save a huge amount of money. The helicopters will only land right in front of the fuel tanks to refuel. So just do a piece the size of this room and we'll be fine. And the rest of it can stay the way it is. Just put signs up there, because that airport, I understand, has no landing charges because the lease is so low that they get enough money to run the whole show, I've been told, through a person, and by leasing the land, the person who has the leases the land, some of the land to a neighbouring dairy farmer, cuts bailage and gets the money off that. And if you look up that airport, there are no landing charges, so they're doing very well. So, and we're at the end of the chain getting, I could use some other words, but I won't, so I'll just leave it there.
Neil, you had comment?
Through your worship, in answer to some of Councillor McDonnell's comments there, the helicopters do not just land in front of the fuel depot, they also land in front of the hangars, etc., to be serviced at different times. And as far as somebody else subleasing off, there is no subleasing at the airport.
In light of us getting distracted by shall we or shall we not upgrade the airport, or what is our liability if a plane gets damaged because we haven't sealed the airport?
The liability falls under the worthiness of the lease that we are supplying, but also any prop damage. One or two chips is okay, but from an aeronautical point of view, if it's severely damaged, and that can be over a certain amount of chipping on the props, it could be a $3,000 replacement.
Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, just through your worship, for the CEO and obviously anyone else that answered the question, picked up on that fact regarding do we actually have, as a commercial lease, there must be a responsibility on the people that are actually in there to make sure it's safety. If we're accepting liability factors there, I'd have concerns about that if we're not providing a suitable premises or tarmac or whatever. So I'd want that to be checked. Secondly, okay, if we defer the 250, how long has it been sitting in the long-term plan? I think it's been sitting there for a couple of years, hasn't it? 2 or 3 years. So clearly we haven't. We've got an aging situation anyway. And the third thing is a question for the CEO: if the 250 was deferred from that budget, will it make a 1% decrease in our rates as of today that we're deliberating on? Which I don't think it will.
Just to start with your last question first, so it is debt funded, so it would have a very small impact on rates. In terms of liability, we would need to go back and check the leases and get that checked for you. So happy to go away and do that and bring that information back. Yeah. There is some obligation if people are paying leases, though, from my understanding, that we'd need to provide a fit for purpose and health and good health and safety in terms of what we're providing.
Just follow up there, Your Worship. Yeah, well, obviously we've discussed it in a public setting now, and we've now have a liability issue that we've declared if it's within our lease and we're actually not providing a suitable surface for lease. So I think we probably should.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Just a change of topic. I note that Pakeke Lions suggested that council work closely with them on recycling, and since we're deferring our recycling, or most of the submissions are to defer, I'm just suggesting that we should work closely with them, and I'd be interested to hear what Jason has to say about that. Thank you.
Through worship, thank you, Councillor Dixon, for the opportunity. I think I will take this opportunity to actually acknowledge and highlight the fantastic work that Pakeke Lions do for our community. We also need to acknowledge the capacity that they do have, and so what we're talking about with curbside recycling is significantly different to, I guess, what they're doing at the moment. I would hope that they always have a place within the Gore district in terms of how helping to minimise and reduce waste, and certainly keen to do that and continue working with them. But we'd also acknowledge that currently they receive quite a small grant from council, and they do have, again, ageing work base as well, but we would certainly continue to keep working with them, looking for opportunities. But the curbside recycling component and the ability to recycle the standardised curbside requirements that are done nationally now may be a bit of a struggle, and so it's one thing to have people taking recycling to them, but to collect from everybody from over 5,000 bins it's a significant ask for that group. So we've just got to be mindful of what they can do, but definitely keen to continue to work with them and bring them into that LTP discussion too, around the opportunities for them to contribute to further waste minimisation within the district.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Jason. Any further comment on this? I just wanted to address while we're in the midst of it that this is, for the public here, this is to debate the submissions. There will come another chance where we will vote on different topics that are discussed here today and whether we go forward or don't. So if you feel a bit uneasy that we're not making a decision here today, that's because it will be in 2 weeks' time. But it's more about conversation and trying to give the staff a bit of direction of where we're heading. Councillor McDonald, did you have another comment?
I'll leave it at the moment, thanks.
Happy to leave it. Councillor Richard McFarlane?
Just through your worship, obviously reference to Councillor Gardine around the asset sales. Obviously it's not something that's clearly listed down here, although we have had discussions there. I think it's probably pertinent to note for the public that they are here, that we do have working groups, and we do have people that are actually looking at the assets currently held. We know that the stakes are high at the moment with what we're doing, and our options are low. So we actually have to look at every option that we're putting on the table there. And I think Councillor Gardine is correct around looking at some of our assets that we have, that we actually have to look at what the market's doing and whether we have to possibly, as we've said before, sell some of the family jewels to make ourselves more fluid.
Thank you, Councillor, and that is very correct. We've just recently gone through our reserve management plan, which has looked at all the different reserves that we hold in different pieces of land. So that's a significant piece of work that's happened in the background, and we will continue to do that work into the long-term plan as well. Councillor Gardine?
We do need a proper working group to do this, and it needs to be done properly and actioned on this time. It's been done in the past and not much action, but we can't keep debt funding work in little bits. It probably mounts up. It'll probably mount up to $3, $4, $5 million over the year, and then not pay those down very quickly. Where debt can't keep rising because we're going to hit our ceiling quicker than we think. And we have got some projects that have got an element of risk, some rather big risks, and we've got to be very careful, prudent in debt funding some of this work. So postponing it may be a good thing for a year, and especially with the drilling under the river happening, it could be a serious blowout. We don't know. We may have to put treatment in at Hilbury Ave at short notice. So we have to be prudent, and also we realise ratepayers' costs have all gone up horrendously, not just the councils.
Thank you, Councillor. Well said. Any further discussion on this report? Councillor Mackenzie.
Changing the subject, through your worship, vehicles. I've noticed a couple of submissions there. There's people talking about vehicles and when we replace them like that and that sort of thing. What is the criteria? Is it an age thing or a mileage thing or a combination of both that we replace vehicles? Thank you, Lorna.
Through your worship, it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
So with a number of our vehicles, we have had a number of vehicles for 8, 9, 10 years. As vehicles get older, of course, the maintenance costs go up. What we're finding is that with renewing the fleet on a more regular basis, then the returns that we get back, so particularly for vehicles maybe by management, they all take a salary sacrifice. So they take a salary sacrifice and the council ends up, we had one car recently, and I'll give you an example. The original cost 4 years ago was $40,000. The person who had this vehicle has been contributing 25% of the cost of that each year towards the cost. So at that point, the net effect was $10,000. It was sold for $30,000. So effectively, so if we had kept it much longer than that, then the maintenance costs may have started ramping up. But each vehicle is assessed on its needs and on its merits at the time. So we do go through a careful process. But again, this is something that we can look at in the revenue and financing policy and the financial strategy as part of the long-term plan, and put some asset disposal criteria in place if elected members want to change that.
Thank you, Lorna. I'll make that a two-part question. Does council, or has council ever looked at leasing vehicles? Is it worth it? Yes or no?
It has been looked at in the past. It was more than 4 years ago. From my experience in other organisations, what you find with lease vehicles is it doesn't always work out cheaper. So I know that there's a lot of lease companies who make you put the vehicle back to right by the time you give it back. So if it's got a scratch on it, if it's got a dent on it, you have to get those repaired before giving them back. So sometimes that bar is set very, very high. So it's a piece of work that could be looked at, but at the moment, from my experience, it's not necessarily cheaper.
Thank you.
I can just add to that, local government does get a pretty good discount on the purchase of vehicles, which does make it a very different proposition to most other businesses.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I've got just a submission that was put forward by Mr. Ian Cupid, and there was a couple of good comments that he made in regards to user-friendly labels, etc., for the recycling bins, and we've also already taken that to WasteNet meeting, and they are going to address that issue, as well as having in the process of making a fridge magnet for everybody with recycled numbers, etc., so you know what, before you go out the door, what you can take out to your bin.
Thank you, Councillor.
And it's at WasteNet cost, not at ours.
Important note. Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion around the table? I just do want to recognise that there are a lot of comments in here, 7 submissions around the reduction of funding for arts and heritage, reviews of the garden plots, etc., etc. Those are duly noted. Those are big service level changes that we will look at during the long-term plan, but to make those big changes within the 2 weeks that we've got before we need to strike a rate is pretty challenging. And would also probably upset the community if we make sudden changes to levels of service. So they're definitely recognised and will feed into that long-term plan process. So they won't be ignored. We're listening. It's just those are quite big process changes that need to happen. If there's no further discussion around the table, I will look for a move that this report be received. Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Fraser. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Does staff have a bit of a lead in terms of where we'll head for 2 weeks' time? Sort of. Cool. Thank you. On to item number 4, which I believe is recycling. Or is it fees and charges? No, fees and... It is recycling. Did Jason want to speak to this report at all?
Thank you, Worship. Actually, no, I think the report sort of outlines the commentary. I'm happy to sort of let the council table discuss it and respond to any questions as required.
Thank you, Jason. It is rather humbling being a strong advocate for recycling ASAP to see only 13% went that way, so I'd take that on board from the public, but I open the floor to councillors for discussion. Councillor Gardine.
I did notice, like Glenys did, that the Pākehā Lions are doing a really good job, and I think we've really got to try and make as much use of them as possible. I know they might not be quite up to standard for council's health and safety and a few other things that Jason's noted, but they're, if we could somehow make a bigger use of them, it's certainly the carbon footprint of taking rubbish all the way to Invercargill to be recycled is huge, and they are directly taking rubbish out of the system that goes to landfill and making a really good job, and they're keen at the moment, make use of them while we can. And I do agree with Jason's idea of going back to two-bin system, I think, and not having to spend $350,000. I think that's a good idea. And I know with the glass and the recycles will go together, it's going to be a bit hard to sort, but it's going to certainly save some capital.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hovell, then Councillor Richard McFarlane.
I too support going back to a two-bin system that we've had in place for a number of years, where all the recycling goes into the one bin. We will need some comment, however, in terms of how regularly that would take place. Previously, it used to be alternating red bin, yellow bin 1 week to the next week. There is also some issues with regard to returning to that system would require all the recyclable material to be taken to Invercargill for processing, which we don't have a contract in place for that at this stage, so there's additional costs to arise from that. But there's also a bigger picture, and that's in terms of where government sits in the direction that it's heading us. At present, it looks as though, well, the regime that we've got in place, we may well have to end up with 4 bins by 2030, which is completely ridiculous when you look at the amount of material that could potentially end up in each of the bins. And as part of that bigger picture, we need to be bearing in mind what other councils are doing. And Invercargill has stepped back from having a 3rd bin for glass. So continuing in the meantime until 2027 of dealing with all the recycling going into the 1 bin and for it to be sorted once it gets to the recycling centre. Southland District has just gone out to consultation, and until they're firmed up on that, it's impossible to say. But I think Invercargill deciding not to introduce the glass bin is a clear indicator to us, given its size, that the overall economics of us going to a 3rd bin now is not really worth it in terms of the benefit that we could get. And just put on my hat as chair of WasteNet, the intent is once the long-term plans and annual plans for the respective councils are in place, there is a need for WasteNet to look at the holistic picture in terms of recycling across the whole district. We have a number of organisations through the district like Lions, like some of the community groups that does preparing or taking green waste and processing it and recycling it, that are doing a tremendous positive job, both in terms of, I guess, doing work that would otherwise be a charge to ratepayers, as well as giving us some better environmental outcomes. At the same time, we need to be thinking about, and I forget the precise word, but we should not be using plastics that aren't recyclable. So there's a whole host of initiatives that need to be followed through in the next 12 months. In the meantime, I think it is sensible for us to keep to our old 2-bin system until the full details are worked through.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you were looking for single-use plastic. Is that the... Yeah. Councillor Rich McFarlane.
Yes, just through your worship, I think Councillor Hovell's covered off a couple of matters I had there. Obviously, I support what the 2 councillors are saying in relation to delaying and sticking with the 2 bins. I believe that direction of what you said regarding the direction of government, we have time. We have a situation where it can be financially a financial advantage to the situation we're in at the moment by having a delay there. Also, put into play the fact that our Lions group is there, and it has come through quite clear in some of the submissions and also in some of the drop-in sessions around people need to get off their chuffs and get out there and actually take their recycling to these bins. There is one at the dump, there's one in Matara, there's a large centre up Hokanui Drive there, so I believe one of our submitters actually said he didn't know how you actually encourage people to do that, because people have an expectation that if you recycle at the end of their driveway, that's what they'll do. They just want to do it there. But it's a small town, and we do have people that are more than capable of taking their recyclables to these places and actually encourage them to do it. The second part of this is in regard to WasteNet. I believe WasteNet now fund a manager, is it? Or are they going to fund a manager, and their liaison role with our recyclers in Gore? What is it, and how do they report back to us? Might be a question for Councillor Hovell.
WasteNet for the last 3 months has had a manager in place, and at our meeting earlier this week we've approved our budget for the next 12 months that will be reported to the respective councils in the short term. It does open up the approach that we are using, particularly in terms of education, and just as I guess as a side issue, if we go to the 2 bins, it's not a matter of doing it immediately, since the bins are actually sitting in people's properties at present. We need to go through an education program before putting that into place to get people back into what's appropriate and what's not in terms of recycling. And I just think back to an article that was in the paper several weeks ago that highlighted the items that are appearing in recycling in Invercargill and Southland, which includes dirty nappies, guns, a whole toilet bowl was in one recycling bin, a lot of animal waste, duck waste. So we need to go through an education program in conjunction with WasteNet, with the advertising that it does. The other component that is in the budget is a review of the waste minimisation plan that currently applies to the region, and a key component of that is education and sharing information. So things like magnets on the fridge. People want to know what can be recycled before they actually take it out to the bin. So there's a whole, as I said before, a whole range of initiatives that will happen over the next 12 months.
Thank you, councillors. Just a question for Jason on that point. I recognise that we talked about 1 April or 1 July 2025, given that that would take a while for the lead time for the bins. Given that if we go with this option we won't need an extra bin, is there a potential that we could start that service earlier? And to follow up from that, are we able to get some costings of what that might look like if we were to start it earlier?
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, and mindful of the environment that we're in, is that there are, the cost isn't in the bin, it's in the operation, so it's the collection and then transport of that. So that's still a cost that hasn't been accounted for in the annual plan process. That's why we've still got those 2 dates there. To bring that forward would be bringing additional costs into this coming year. I guess that's a final decision for elected members, but it's at this stage what I've sort of been recommending in this item is that we stick with one of those 2 time frames, but we go look at the cost saving we get from the reduced capital cost around an extra bin, and try and implement that as soon as we can. But that's yeah, I could look at bringing those costs back, but they won't be overly different to the 3 bin system in terms of collection and transportation. So won't be a massive cost saving to what has been discussed in previous reports to council.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor Reid.
My question was just answered.
Oh, perfect. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I mentioned it a couple of meetings ago about WasteNet helping Pakeke Lions, particularly funding-wise. Has that progressed in any way?
It's not an issue that I can comment on in this setting. It is one for WasteNet to follow up on a confidential basis.
Because second to that, and I understand what Jason's saying, it's at the moment I take it our glass is getting picked up and just getting tipped in a big pile in Gore. Is that correct?
Yes, it's being stored at the transfer station there.
So if we go back to 1 bin with everything in, then it's transported in Invercargill, the logistics around that I can understand it can be quite expensive. And this is why, I would push, because every tonne that we don't send to the tip saves us money, as I understand. Is it at like $60 or $58 or $62 a tonne?
Yeah, currently $50 for every tonne that's transported to the landfill, and that from 1 July that goes up to 60.
Hold on, you've got my figures somewhere around about right. So every tonne that we can save in all particular way, particularly say through Kiki Lines, which is costing us little per year, would save us in the long run in costing and everything like that. So I'll surely push for that. But second to that, I read through one of the submissions, and I just want to support the people at Southern Recycling, because I have a close deal with them, having a daughter with a similar disability. All for those people who said we shouldn't have people with impairments working there, you need to go there and stand with them and talk with them. They enjoy every second of their day. And people say others should employ them. Well, why aren't they employed elsewhere? So I'm in support of them. As someone actually said, mentioned prisoners doing it. Well, good luck. We can't get them to work the best of times, and we're going to force them to mix someone's rubbish. It won't work. So just a point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yeah, just for Jason, through your worship, just clarify, it's $50 or $60 a tonne at the waste station, but waste that leaves Gore costs how much to send to the bend? Total tonnage per tonne, it's about 160, is it?
Yeah, it's somewhere around that.
160 or $170. So everyone knows and understands, it's not $50 or $60 a tonne. For every tonne that we can stop going over the transfer station face and going into those containers, which are then compacted and put on trucks and taken to the bend, we save ourselves $160 to $170. So I think the Pakeke Lions did last year or the year before put 650 tonnes of cardboard through their presses. So you can actually see the cost savings there. Which is a considerable amount, and considering that money then goes back into the community through grants and scholarships to kids. So I think it's important that what Councillor Fraser has said around WasteNet supporting what we've got here, because we actually get two bangs at that dollar. We save the ratepayers, and we're also bringing money back into the community through scholarships and grants.
Thank you, Councillor. Great point. Jason, did you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of comments. One, so with the waste levy fund as well, waste levy, 50% of that comes back to councils. That's a proportionate figure though, so there is some income that goes alongside that, but I'm going to take this opportunity to push that. Again, curbside recycling is just one part of waste minimisation for our district. There's a lot of opportunities exist, but we have to invest in some of those. Recycling and reuse centres are fantastic for smaller districts. You only have to sort of pop up and see some of the ones that are in Central Otago. Waitaki now has got a pretty cool one that keep a lot of items out of the landfills, and so there's opportunities to work there along with, again, community groups, and so this is just the start of this conversation. There's a lot that we can bring and work through and look at opportunities to be smarter and minimise that waste that's going to landfill.
Thank you, Jason. Any further comments? Councillor Gardine?
I think as a council we should really promote, advertise and our local recycling. I don't think we do it enough, and that's quite very, very important, as Richard pointed out. The Pakeke Lions, every tonne we send there is going to save us a huge amount of dollars. And if we go down to recycling in Invercargill, it'll still cost us quite a lot. But I mean, if we can keep it in-house and do it in Gore and promote it, and we may have to even more than just promote it. You may have rubbish bin centres around the town, as well as not just at the Pakeke Lions. And they're willing to go and pick up those bins in different places. So some thought needs to be put into it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid and then Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to hear Jason say that looking at the reusable goods at possibly the landfill site. I've always been a strong supporter of that, and I'd really be keen to see that go ahead. The other thing I'd like to remind, apart from the Pakikis, of course, is that businesses here recycle light bulbs, batteries as well, I think it's mitre 10. And the only other comment I have on recycling, I do know other people who actually take their recycling to other places who recycle the different plastics, soft plastics and things. And, you know, those people are often forgotten about. They make the effort, and we should all make an effort. And actually, leading on from that, the other comment I did have and had lost was when we go and do communications around the recycling and the contamination issues, I see one council recently has actually managed to have some sort of if you contaminate and we catch, you don't get your recycling uplifted. And I'd like to see a component of that be investigated before we actually move on to that. I think it's not pleasant for people to have to do it, and then once again you've got the added cost of going to Invercargill, then to the landfill. So if we could look into that, it would be great.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to steal Councillor Havel's thunder and say that WasteNet is working on that actively, including a bylaw for all three councils, just trying to get the conversation moving along, because I feel like we're coming to the same consensus and we can definitely talk about recycling for a while. Councillor McPhail.
Through your worship, thank you. I agree with everybody. This is one way we can save money for the ratepayers directly by asking the ratepayers to help with it. There's not much else we can do with lots of the things, but it's a no-brainer. They've got the capacity to do more recycling at Pakiki lines. We can encourage it through education, WasteNet or whatever to compost or recycle or whatever. A lot of people out there don't recycle because they think a lot of it goes nowhere. That's our job, to educate people and say, look, this is what's going on just down the road, and we can actually save the ratepayers money. I think we need to support it more.
Thank you, Councillor. I will look for a mover for the first two. I think that we can all agree on option 3. I do wonder whether that last recommendation is best saved for the meeting on the 25th when we will be discussing the annual plan, and whether we could have those difference in costings for that meeting. Is that okay with councillors, rather than deciding on a date today without the costings in front of us? So could I have a mover for those first two recommendations, that the report be received and the council endorse option 3 for adoption in the annual plan? Councillor Havel to move, Councillor Dixon to second. No further comment. I will put the motion. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item number 5.
Your worship, with regard to recommendation 3 there, I think we need to be a little bit more specific in terms of what we want reported back in 2 weeks. And I'd actually like to do it as a motion that for our next meeting, that we do receive a report that identifies the costs associated with the 2-bin service and its impact on rates of the date that is, the earlier date that is selected there. If it's for next financial year, then it will be dealt with next year, but I think we need to be upfront in terms of knowing exactly what we're committing to.
Do you have a recommendation to that effect, Susan? Happy to move?
Yes.
A seconder? Councillor Phillips, a second. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Carried. Thank you, Councillor. Item number 5, proposed fees and charges for the 2024-25 annual plan. Would you like to speak to this, Lorna?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. The Council has two main ways of obtaining revenue. One is through rates and one is through fees and charges. Now, our revenue and financing policy sets out the levels of rates and fees and charges that previous councils have adopted to be fair and reasonable. So when budget holders come to us with the fees and charges, they are looking at the cost for user pays. For the amount of user pays and fees and charges we put, it means it's not going on the rates and the ratepayer isn't paying. So I just wanted to outline that for a start as to why we have fees and charges, why the fees and charges go up, and the balance between a user pay system and a ratepayer picking up the costs for some of these personal or user pay services. So I'll take the report as read. Happy to take some questions. I've got some relevant budget holders in the room to be able to talk to their fees and charge increases.
Thank you, Lorna. Councillors, Councillor Hovell.
Looking at the detail of what's in that document has been extremely difficult just by the layout and the font size that's used. So even putting it on a big computer didn't help me all that much. But I noticed, and I've got 4 points here, I think, the official information request costs. The photocopying assumes everything will be done in black and white on A4. So the photocopying costs that are showing for official information need to be reviewed. And the hourly rate that shows up there does not take into account that if consultants are doing the work of bringing together the official information that's been requested, then it should be charged out at the consultant's cost, not the cost at about 1/3 of that, which is what's in that document. Also got a query in relation to all the planning costs. The documents that, if you go and look in fees and charges now, say that most of the planning costs are a deposit, not a fixed fee, and everything that's in that document shows up as a fixed fee at present from what I can see. Yeah, the deposit would take care of most of it. Also in planning, there's refers to section 125 requests, which deals with applications for extensions to consent periods. It should actually read extensions to give effect to consents, and if it's dealt with as a deposit, then that's fine. A little bit further down, it deals with section 139A, seeking existing use determinations, and yes, again, if it's dealt with as a deposit, that's fine. But I also notice under section 224, it has some fees there to be paid. It doesn't, and in the category it says that if there's no conditions applying for a consent, there's one fee that applies, and if there are conditions, another applies. It does not represent the situation where the conditions of the consent have actually not been met, which can result in extremely high cost, where council staff have to go and do several inspections and follow up. So I think they're just points that need to be picked up on as part of the reporting back, please, or final determination.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Just had a question for Martin and possibly Lorna as well. Just with the aquatic centre charges, how do we rank in terms of our neighbours? Are we pretty close? Are we higher or lower than the surrounding pools? Just noticed with chemicals going up in price, and I know that pools are ultimately a loss leader, but just how we compare.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. We are very competitive, so we are actually the cheapest facilities pretty much throughout New Zealand, bar Palmerston North. We are one of the cheapest.
Sounds like there's some wiggle room there then. Thank you. Any further comments from councillors? appear to be none. We're all happy with the fees and charges. You're right there, Councillor McDonald.
One there about registered dogs and unregistered dogs. If they're run away, there's no benefit with having your dog registered. You still get charged 100 rather than we used to have a discount. Just wonder if any benefit, we've cut out the benefit of having the dog registered, so there's no penalty for an unregistered dog. If you're going to put it up to $100, why don't we stick it to 150 for the unregistered dog, just to make sure they feel the pain.
I'd suggest there is a penalty because they then get charged for registering the dog at the same time if it's not registered.
Okay, rightio. That'll.
5 years old, almost 5 years.
So?
Councillor Fraser.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just on dogs, I see Southland District have gone for Tag for Life. Have we thought about that as another option?
Through Your Worship, it's not something that I'm aware that we've looked at, but it is something we can look at going forward.
Councillor McDonald, your mic.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just wondering if we could do a cost analysis on lowering the swimming charges from 80 down to 70. How much would that cost us if we were to do that? Because there are a lot of 70-year-olds that have asked that question.
I think, Your Worship, we've already done that analysis. It was about 30-odd thousand, was it not?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship, but that's not to say that we'll be thinking very much closely at the parking. To drop it down to 75, that'll be one of my things that we'll bring up shortly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I don't think we talked about it much in the previous item, but yeah, definitely looking at parking moving into the future as well, based on that submission from Grey Power 2. Again, that's quite a big service level change, so that'll need some thorough thought in the long-term plan process. Councillor Gardine?
I was just looking at the parking one too, and I was thinking, well, really, you need a whole program on do we actually need parking meters?
I think based on the graph and the previous item, I think it will come up in the long-term plan as an item. Councillor Hovell.
I'd actually take a contrary view. When you look at it from a retailer's point of view, if there's no parking meters, cars are going to sit outside one shop all day. And the parking meters are a means by which of making fair use of the spaces outside individual shops. Bearing in mind, the further south you go in this country, the closer people want to park to a shop, and if they can't get a park extremely close, they tend to go elsewhere. So from the point of view of the businesses, I think it's an important component.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a contrary view, but in light of getting off topic, I think it'll be a conversation for the long-term plan and it'll be heavily debated. If there's no further comment, could you just go through your amendments again, please, Councillor Hovell? We'll need to make a decision on them today to be able to give Lorne a chance to make those adjustments.
In terms of the official information requests, the photocopying charges should be the same as set out generally earlier in the document. The staff costs should be, and consultant costs. The staff costs can stay as in the document, although it just has a single level fee per hour for staff. I'm wondering if it should be based actually on the individual ones that are also in the front of the document.
Through Your Worship, I can talk to that one around Lagoimas and official information requests, and there is there's guidance within the legislation on being reasonable charges, and so on. So it is not very often that we impose that. It's where we have a large request, or there's a lot of research required, or it's going to require a lot of staff time to go into. To date, we've used it very, very rarely. But I'm pretty sure the Act talks about it being fair and reasonable and not being an excessive cost. And I'm getting a nod from our General Manager of Communication and Customer Support there.
What worries me, though, is that unless you actually have a reasonable level provided for in the fees and charges, that you don't have the ability to, with some of the potentially larger ones that could come up, of doing it. So I'd suggest that the consultant's costs be recognised at cost as part of that. And you've always got the ability to discount from what the actual cost is if there is public benefit to get that reasonableness. So that was the official information request. The other ones really, from a planning point of view, should be clear that the fees are deposits, not final items, not fixed items. And that an addition needs to be made for the item on section 224. No, if all the planning ones are a deposit, then that would be sufficient. Yes. So just the two, simplifying it in that form.
Are you happy to move those amendments? Could I please have a seconder for those amendments? Councillor Phillips, any discussion on those amendments? Councillor Reid?
Sorry, I'm just a bit behind the playing field here. Can Russell perhaps speak to that and clarify exactly what benefit that would be?
I think what Councillor Havel is highlighting is that consent applications are charged on a time recovery basis, and so these are actually deposits. The recovery of the application depends on the number of hours spent, etc., etc. So it's just clarifying really for applicants that this is that is in fact the case, and so we can review that and just make sure it is clear in the document.
Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. If there's no further discussion on fees and charges, we will move on. And that brings us to the end of the public session. Thank you very much to everyone who has come in attendance today. It is great to see this chamber full. And I'm sure we will see most of you on the 25th when we deliberate the annual plan. Councillors, we will take a 5-minute intermission and then we will